Hey guys, Lex here again, and today I am playing through Path of Exile 2 on hardcore solo self-found using only the shield bash from Ray's shield. So this is definitely not a dedicated build video, this is just a stupid challenge run idea I had towards the end of this current league, but the shield bash is a super low damage ability that actually has a ton of jank attached to it, and I thought it would be funny to complete the campaign using nothing but this skill, and I wanted to narrate this run a bit for you guys and share my experiences with you in case you wanted to try this very challenging run. But I wouldn't recommend that unless you know, hate yourself. But I will mention that even if you're not super interested in the challenge run aspect, there's still a lot that I learned when it comes to boss fights in particular regarding stun buildup and blockable attacks and the fact that it mini stuns bosses each time you successfully bash them, which I think will be useful for honestly any type of shield warrior that uses active block. And real quick, I'll go over the two basic rules for this run. One, I cannot use any other skill other than Ray's shield. This means no Mace Strike, no Magma Barrier, you know, Spirit Gems are included on this ban list, no skills granted by weapons like Scepters or Wands, no Ascendancy skills, etc. Literally just Ray's shield and shield bash. On top of that, no trading obviously. I thought it'd be too easy to just hop in trade and grab some high armor shield every now and then, so I went not only solo self-found, but hardcore solo self-found, just to raise the stakes even higher. This is making for an intense playthrough, to say the least. But hey, that's enough of an intro, let's get into the video. I gotta say, this run has been somewhat educational and interesting as far as learning like how to navigate the game with such little AoE and relying on monster attacks and animations for my own attack. I obviously can't shield bash until I block a hit, and I've learned a lot about how much stun buildup monsters and bosses deal. Lots of variants and unexpected happenings here, as you'll see. But the run overall has been mostly painful, so painful. Alright, so real quick, I think the way I want to structure these videos is, starting out, I'll go over how progressing through the act went overall, how the build and the gear is shaping up, and how group clearing in particular improves, because right now, it's pretty terrible. But after that, I'll go over all of the boss fights in the order I fought them and how each felt in their own section of the video, and honestly what I ended up learning from each boss fight, as there is a lot more nuance to stun threshold and stun buildup when trying to fish for shield bashes from their movesets. And also how long each fight took, because some of them, oh boy. Also, as a quick note, a big change that was implemented at the start of this league is that active block, our only way to prime these shield bashes, can block all hits now, including area of effect hits, which is a big part of what makes this kind of run possible. However, they say that the only attacks you cannot block are the ones that bosses perform with that big red animation windup, but what I've discovered is that may not entirely be true. You'll see what I mean in a bit, but for now let's talk about how clearing the act went overall. So aside from this zombie I killed with a knife in the beginning, I actually sprinted by the earliest mobs to grab the shield to make this run legit. It was all shield bash right from the beginning. However, shield bash deals a ton of stun buildups on targets you hit, which I was aware of, but when it comes to clearing monsters early on, the heavy stun actually slows you down since many normal mobs are heavy stunned in 1 or 2 shield bashes but not killed, and I had to wait for them to get up and hit me again before I could shield bash again. This was rough to adjust to and made progressing through Clearfell, the Grellwood, etc. very slow. There were a couple of solutions though. In a crowd, I just made sure I was staggering hits best I could. I'd let one mob hit me, try to hit only a portion of the group, and then have one of the missed mobs hit me to finish off the majority of that group with another shield bash. Sometimes it also made sense to just let ranged mobs do their thing, since they could trigger my shield bash from a range, so I could go around using these projectiles I was hit with to shield bash multiple groups down before finishing off the ranger. Overall though, just to remove the headache, I started playing around with the pin 1 support gem and committed to it fully for clearing once I hit the Ogham farmlands, since this support gem converts heavy stun buildup from shield bash into pin buildup, which is a lot better since mobs aren't stunned anymore, they just get rooted in place instead, and I could just walk up to them and trigger another shield bash instead of waiting for them to get out of their heavy stun animation. Honestly, I probably should have just used this as my first support gem, but I was trying out a bunch of other stuff for damage, like fire infusion for some ignites, which turned out to be crap because the flammability buildup is laughable, as is the actual ignite damage. But yeah, pin 1 was great when I started using it to clear up the last part of Act 1. So with the heavy stunned mobs issue solved, I needed to work on the other 2 big problems. my own heavy stun buildup, and damage. From very early on, it became clear that two of the most important stats for this build were going to be stun threshold and, not surprisingly, thorns. Initially, I went with this upper path in the passive skill tree with where the warrior starts out, you know, where you get some melee damage and strength, but I quickly realized that this was a mistake because of how easy it is to get heavy stun from mobs while I was clearing. And there are some stun threshold nodes you can grab early on if you go the bottom path instead. So as soon as I could respec, I put those points down that way and I immediately felt the difference. It helped with my clear speed a ton since I didn't have to worry about my character getting heavy stunned as often, though obviously clear speed was still pretty crap overall using shield bash, don't get me wrong. But yeah, basically it was apparent that I had to stack as much stun threshold as I can for this silly run as early as possible, whether it be through gear rolls or the passive skill tree. Thorns I found to be super helpful in just dealing damage to mobs. Obviously, it's a way to capitalize on getting hit, which is happening a lot with this build, and since Thorns damage applies to blocked hits, it's a no-brainer. Though I don't picture this becoming a dedicated Thorns build since this is, again, solo self-found, so I can't really build like a crazy Thorns character while leveling. At least I don't think I can, but it's still definitely a role I am prioritizing in my gear because it just helps with the damage overall, especially while clearing. But yeah, aside from that, I was prioritizing trying to get a high armor shield since the shield bash damage scales with your shield's armor rating. I used some of my early currency to try and craft one early on and failed miserably. Tried again towards the end of Act 1 and made an okay shield that was a decent upgrade, but still kinda mid, but that's what I ended up rolling with into Act 2. I also got fairly lucky and found a gray make very early in this run from the Rust King. If you don't know what that is, it is a helmet that is great for leveling. It just gives you a bunch of each stat minus whatever your current level is for each. So honestly, this was a welcome sight, especially for survivability since this run was such a meme. Last thing I'll mention in this section is the support gem progression. Obviously, as I said earlier, Pin was super helpful early on for clearing, and even against certain bosses, which we'll get into in the next section, but I wish I was using it earlier, as well as Bleed, which was easily the support gem that added the most damage onto my shield bashes compared to all of the other ones I experimented with, since you just need to deal physical damage and not worry about building up an elemental ailment for the effect. Again, if I started this run over, I would have rolled with Pin and Bleed as my earliest support gems. It saves so much time while clearing and against bosses as well, to be honest, though I'd sometimes swap in Brutality depending on the boss fights since I found the heavy stun animations useful for getting rid of my own heavy stun buildup at times. I think potentially Brutality and Bleed might be enough to one-shot normal mobs depending on your shield, so maybe that'd also be a good clearing combo. But to sum up, I'd say that the run felt torturous during the earliest zones, going through Clearfell, the Grellwood, Cemetery of the Eternals, etc., since I was still figuring out just how to manage mobs being heavy stunned, my own heavy stun meter, and honestly just damage since it was so low and I got very unlucky with my shield crafts and vendors. I think if I had to choose one zone that felt the worst during this act, it'd definitely be Freythorn. Something about the chaos damage I had to be wary about, the crowds of mobs at times, especially during the rituals, and ultimately the boss fight, which was easily the longest out of all of them this run. It just made it so difficult. But hey, speaking of bosses, we're going to quickly go over each one and how this shield bash build performed against each when it comes to damage, stun buildup, etc. Let's get into it. Alright guys, I think this will be a fun section. We're going to go over every boss fight in the act in the order that I fought them, and I'll basically talk about how the fight went overall when it comes to shield bash damage, the boss's heavy stun threshold, how much heavy stun they dealt to me, and also their movesets and red animation attacks. I didn't try blocking all of these red animation attacks since it is hardcore solo self-found and I didn't want to risk dying obviously, but I noticed that I could actually block portions of some of these so-called unblockable attacks, which is something that might be useful for you if you fight the map or citadel versions of these bosses. So I'm going to go over that where I noticed some of this stuff. And the last thing, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I'm also going to tell you how long these boss fights took because man, some of them took a long time. But let's start at the beginning, the Bloated Miller. Pretty straightforward tank and spank, but to be honest, this fight took a long time because of all of the heavy stun buildup. dude kept getting heavy stunned over and over, and I'd have to wait for him to break out of the animation to start hitting me again. It was also somewhat helpful when he started summoning extra mobs so I could use them for the extra shield bashes, but overall this took a long time because of the heavy stunning, as well as the fact that I had no support gems, no real gear, no levels, etc. He also has this like backhand swing that should be blockable, and it is if you are at the right angle, but I noticed that I kept getting tagged by this and damaged even when it really looks like I shouldn't, so a little bit of jank there that I had to work around. The Bloated Miller has two unblockable attacks. One is a big slow overhead swing that sends out a shockwave. You basically just strafe roll to avoid this, and the other is a charge attack into a swing. On this hardcore solo self-found character, I didn't try blocking either of these, but I've seen this on another shield warrior I made and decided to get some footage for it anyway. So basically the unblockable overhead swing is actually fully blockable. Yeah, you can just straight up block this entire attack. It has some big stun buildup, but I mean, no part of this attack is unblockable, even if both the swing and the shockwave hit you. So I don't know if this is a bug or an oversight by GGG, because this is straight up a blockable attack, no joke. The charge, on the other hand, is fully unblockable except the small melee swing at the end. I think it used to be the other way around. Overall, this fight took 5 minutes and 1 second to get through, which is substantially longer than it should take for any character doing a normal playthrough. Next up, Beira of the Rotten Pack. Honestly, this was also a fairly forward tank and spank. This boss doesn't have any unblockables, so you can basically take advantage of every attack to queue up a shield bash. Her attacks also didn't seem to have much stun buildup as well, so this was actually a pretty easy fight overall. The only scary part is when she summons the wolves, which actually deal some stun buildup, so I had to be careful there. I even got heavy stunned once, but I ended up okay. Pretty easy overall, just block and bash. This one took about 2 minutes and 51 seconds, so not too bad as far as this build is going. The Devourer was next, which also felt pretty straightforward. There were two basic moves I was looking for to shield bash, which was its little arm swipe and a faster lunging bite attack. It did these fairly often, so I didn't feel like I was waiting too long for a bash, but it does have 3 red animation attacks, all of which are pretty lengthy, so this did slow down the fight a bit alongside all of the burrowing animations, though when it starts summoning the adds in phase 2 it helps out a lot, since I could just use their attacks for shield bashes, which was actually preferable since the boss attacks dealt some pretty significant stun buildup. I didn't test too much out with the red animation attacks on this unfortunately, so I apologize for that, but it has a forward slam which is followed up by vomiting a bunch of venom, basically just roll around to its back to avoid getting hit. Same with the second red animation attack where it just shoots a bunch of venom projectiles, just again stayed behind it and waited or used some of the little guys for a bash. And the third is basically when it burrows underground and emerges elsewhere. Pretty easy to avoid, I just stayed away from the red circle. Its tail attacks were also blockable with little stun buildup, but I don't think I ever got a bash off on one of those. Overall, this fight took 5 minutes and 45 seconds, quite a bit longer than Beira. Next was the Brambleghast. Honestly, I kept using this double swipe move that I kept shield bashing off of, trying to get the bash off during the first swipe of the attack since I didn't want the extra buildup from the second. Honestly, pretty easy overall. When I started summoning those extra vine tentacles, it was pretty welcome since they just throw out blockable swings and they let me shield bash even more. It also has a spinning purple projectile attack that it likes to throw out, and I'd sometimes tried to get a bash off from it, but it also hurts, so mostly I was just trying to block and avoid damage from it. I had to play a little carefully with its one red animation attack where it sticks its arms underground for that big double overhead slam with the purple explosions. It deals a ton of damage, so I did not risk experimenting with a block on that. I'm pretty sure that's the only red attack it has, though it also likes to summon those homing chaos lights that'll explode when they reach you, and though they are technically blockable, they deal a lot of stun buildup, so I opted to avoid them as well. Overall, pretty easy fight. Took about 3 minutes and 19 seconds to take it down. The Rust King had a really easy arm swipe, which was the main attack I wanted to get shield bashes off of, though he has a lot of blockable moves. He has the sword drop attack you'll see often, but that was an attack I wanted to be wary of since it had some sizable stun buildup. He also has this multi-directional projectile attack that is also blockable, but this one had some crazy stun buildup. I think I got heavy stunned when trying to use it, and I was like, alright, I think I'll avoid that one. In phase 2, when he starts summoning his boys, the lightning attack should be blockable since there isn't a red animation windup, but I think I got hit by it every time while blocking. I'm not sure if you have to face a specific direction, but that was something I had to look out for and avoid when he'd perform it. Obviously, like other bosses with summoned mobs, I'd often use them to get shield bashes off on the guy while also making sure to clear the mobs. Just again, stun buildup is an ever-present concern, so I just kept very close attention to that while doing all of this. Fairly easy though, I definitely had to pay attention to the stun buildup on this one more closely compared to some of the others. Took 3 minutes and 8 seconds to take down. After that was the Rotten Druid. Has another arm swipe attack that I tried to take advantage of, but honestly, he only has one red animation attack and pretty much everything is blockable for a shield bash, even the exploding mushrooms in the middle, but I don't think it makes sense to try and get a bash off of them because he's never really that close to the middle, but everything else was fair game. His projectiles, the root tentacles he summons, etc. His one red animation attack where he summons the boulder and chucks it at you, I did not test if this was blockable or not because, well, again, why risk it when he has so many other blockables and this is hardcore solo self-found. Definitely one of the easier fights aside from the occasional annoying teleport that just prolonged it. Took about 4 minutes and 55 seconds, though this could have been a lot shorter if I used the pin support gem, which I was not at the time. Alright guys, next up is Asinia, the Praetor's Consort, and this was easily the toughest boss fight so far by a huge margin, which I initially was not expecting because I usually have an easy time with her. A lot of factors played into making this boss fight so tough. One was definitely because of her energy shield. She would actually recharge it so often from the heavy stun animation that this was the first time I realized I should be using pin on bosses, so I actually switched to that support gem mid-fight. But man, she has plenty of blockable attacks, but they all deal like moderate to strong stun buildup. She has that energy shield you have to be aware of, so you have to make sure you are being aggressive enough with this crap damage ability or else that shield would recharge. And on top of that, she would summon those heavy shield skeletons that also dealt a bunch of stun buildup and would hurt when they hit you. All around, this fight was brutal. The red animation attack she has summons a bone cage around your character before barraging the area with unblockable projectiles. And with this silly shield bash build, you obviously cannot just break out of the bone cage without something to trigger the shield bash. So this was a tough puzzle to figure out during the fight, but I eventually just use the mob she summoned for a shield bash trigger to break out of the bone cage, or I just roll and pray, man. Eventually though, I was able to take her down, but I'll be totally honest, I thought this fight could potentially end the run. I even got heavy stunned at one point and almost wiped, but I soldiered through it and eventually took her down. This fight took a whopping 12 minutes and 11 seconds to get through. Again, mostly because I had to play it so safe and be extra careful of stun buildup, having to cut through her energy shield every time it came back, etc. It was so tough, you guys, but when she finally went down, I felt the satisfaction of taking down a boss in like a Souls game. It was great. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Draven the Eternal Praetor was next, which is the one I expected to be more of a challenge, but much to my surprise, he was actually not too bad. He has plenty of sword swings you can shield bash off of, some moderate stun buildup on each swing, but honestly it's all pretty manageable. He has one red animation attack where he splits the ground with that green spirit stuff and then makes a spirit explosion erupt from the middle of this fissure with an overhead swing. And yeah, I did not try to block any of this because I was once again paranoid. But overall, not as bad as I thought it would be. Even when he's all hyped up on the spirits touching him, just had to pay close attention to my stun bar and avoid the shotgun swings, spirit ground split, and I was good to go. He took 5 minutes and 57 seconds to take down, so much shorter than his more difficult half, though I did not use pin on this one because I figured I'd need more time to empty my own stun bar from his aggression, so there was quite a bit of heavy stunning going on. Right after Draven, I fought Lachlann of Endless Lament, and this was another fight that actually felt pretty easy, all things considered. He actually has many blockable attacks, including his very scary My Rage Burns overhead swing, which used to be unblockable, but now you can just block it straight up. This attack has a lot of stun buildup, so I just had to be aware of that, but it was worth taking advantage of because even if you get heavy stun from the first swing, his animation for this attack is so long you are able to just stand up before he can do anything else. Strangely enough, similar to a move from the next boss, this slam actually sometimes dealt no stun stun buildup though, yet I was still able to queue up a shield bash from it. Might be a slight oversight here. And he has one red animation attack where he winds up an overhead swing and sends out a bunch of earthy spikes in a cone from where this attack lands. I didn't try blocking this, but it looks like there may be two parts to the attack, the melee swing and the earth spike shockwave, so maybe one of these parts is blockable, but I can't say for sure. I still was not using the bleed support gem, nor was I using pin here because I was afraid of this guy's stun buildup and wanted to use heavy stunning the boss to empty my own stun meter, as with some other fights. But honestly, I feel like I could have gotten away without those heavy stuns, so those two support gems would have likely sped this one up significantly. Overall, this took 5 minutes and 27 seconds, so not too bad considering, but yeah, I felt like this one could have been faster and was overall a pretty easy fight. The Crowbell, a bunch of different swings and punches you can take advantage of for bashes, but this one also has quite a few true unblockables, so it's important to look out for that red animation and be ready to avoid accordingly. First two phases were pretty uneventful, just tanking and spanking, avoiding the red animation attacks, of which there are many. It has a jump punch into the ground, which is easy enough to avoid, and in phase 2, just a single overhead punch to avoid, but it also has one where it just punches the ground in front of it repeatedly, and that was a scary one since the damage could build up kind of quickly if you get caught in the wrong spots, so I just made sure I would rotate behind it if I saw that one winding up. The third phase is where things got a little more interesting. Well, first off, there was an extra monster in there, which I was not expecting, and that definitely threw me off, but when it came to the Crowbell's moveset, it had some new attacks. There were 3 attacks I noticed it would use, one where it would swipe with its arm first before swinging with the bell as a follow-up. This one I like to keep bashes off of, though it had some pretty intense stun buildup. The other was an overhead swing with the bell, which had some insane stun buildup, but then sometimes no stun buildup at all. This was super strange to me, like I'd clearly block it and get a shield bash off of it at times with 0 stun buildup from such a heavy attack. Seems like a little jank going on here. And then we have the red animation combo where it does a double swipe with the bell. Now the swings directly in front of the Crowbell are unblockable and will hurt, but I noticed that there was a portion of the attack that was blockable behind it. I don't know if this is some shockwave or what, but I started taking advantage of this for extra shield bashes as it felt safe to do so and would save me a lot of time, which is a big focus of this run, doing things safely but also quickly. This was a lengthier fight, 6 minutes and 46 seconds, and felt kind of moderate as far as difficulty went. Easy enough if you are blocking the right attacks, but it definitely felt like you could get caught out by a run-ending unblockable or heavy stun if you weren't extra careful. Alright, the King in the Mist. I'm going to be honest with you, this was easily the most frustrating and annoying fight of the whole act. And this is all because of his phase 1, man. Jesus Christ. He spends so much time just jumping around and it was very difficult to get shield bashes off on him. A major oversight on my part was, once again, choosing not to use the pin support gem this early, and I think this would have shaved off a lot of time since the heavy stun animation was so long and allowed him to regenerate his energy shield. But even aside from this, he just spends so much time teleporting, performing true unblockables, and summoning totems, as well as casting those curses and those damn blood pools. There was just so much more to pay attention to that it made it hard to be aggressive on this guy. So he has one true unblockable in phase 1, the AoE Thorn Nova thing. Yeah, can't block it. I tried, and I mean, I just blocked what I could, his thorn grips and his little projectiles for bashes, but man, the bashes felt so scarce here. The totems were annoying, but not so bad after a certain point. As long as I positioned myself near him when he summoned, I could wipe them out in one bash since he almost always followed them up with a blockable attack. The totems themselves actually emit an attack, but it's a bit weird. You can block it and get a bash off of it, but oh god, they hurt, even when blocked. I'm not sure what's going on here exactly. I know you get a stacking debuff that increases your damage taken, but I'd still get the blocking a hit animation when damaged by the totem. Something a little weird going on here. Phase 2 is a lot easier as far as getting shield bashes off. He has more attacks that go off quicker, doesn't teleport anymore. It felt so much better than phase 1 for this run. 2 red animation attacks, the unblockable Thorn Nova like in phase 1, but he also has this purple spirit bomb attack that he'll chuck at you after saying the end of meaning is nigh. The collision of that projectile is unblockable, but the little purple boils it summons afterwards are blockable, so I would sometimes use those to get an extra bash in. Yeah man, this was the roughest one so far, purely because of that annoying phase 1. This fight took, I kid you not, 23 minutes and 23 seconds. legitimately insane. I felt like I was going crazy, man. Difficulty-wise, I would say it was moderate, but really it was just the phase 1 taking so long that made this so annoying. Definitely would use Pin for this one if I could do it again, but even then, this still would probably be the longest fight in my opinion. And thank goodness for the next fight, the Executioner. At this point, I had upgraded my shield, so I was dealing a bit more damage and was now fully committed to the Pin 1 support gem, so no heavy stun animations to deal with. This honestly felt like a pretty straightforward tank and spank for the most part, just had to avoid the red animation attacks. Pretty much just used his sweeping horizontal swings, his kick, and his little backhand attack for the majority of shield bashes, and a bit of his mobs during phase 2. All of which have some pretty significant stun buildup, to be honest. It may not look like a lot here in the footage, but that's because I had grabbed some pretty strong stun threshold nodes on the passive skill tree by this point. Ironically, out of all of the attacks, I think his backhand actually had the most stun buildup, which is not what I was expecting. And as a fun little strategy, there were moments where I could interrupt his red animation attacks pretty consistently with the mob swarming me, so that made for a fun mini game during this fight. Speaking of which, I didn't block any of his red animation attacks this time around because they hit like a damn truck. He has an overhead swing that shoots out a shockwave forward, a fiery overhead swing that takes a bit of charging up on his part, then shoots out a big fiery shockwave in a circle in front of him, and then he has the guillotine drop, which I think does the most damage out of all of these moves if you stand directly beneath it. Either way, all of these I wanted to avoid to not die this run, so parts of them may be blockable, but I can't be sure. Overall, felt like another straightforward tank and spank. Took about 3 minutes and 51 seconds for me to take him down, and considering the fight before this one, things were feeling good. Candlemass, the living Rite, has a pretty balanced mix of red animation attacks alongside some basic swipes and swings with its sword, and this fight was actually very much on the easier side. One note, this boss in particular is very easy to heavy stun, so I definitely wanted to use the Pin support gem here, or we'd be here for a while. It has a few sword slashes that are super easy to take advantage of for those shield bashes, did that every time I could, and it has 3 red animation attacks. The first one, it holds its sword over its head with both hands, does a twirl and swings at you while shooting out a fiery projectile. Interestingly enough, you can block the melee portion of this attack and only get hit by the fiery projectile, which does negligible damage, at least this early on, so I ended up blocking every one of those attacks for shield bashes when I discovered this. The second red attack is a fiery breath attack it channels and tracks you with. I can't be sure if you can block this or not, but I feel like when I got tagged from it, I noticed my passive block going off. I could be wrong here though, so to play it safe, I just avoided trying to block the attack completely, and it is super easy to avoid if you just stay close and run in a circle around Candlemass. Last red attack is the Candle Shot Bombardment, where the boss takes a knee and shoots a ton of these everywhere. Yes, this is technically a red animation attack because you hear the sound cue and the red animation, but this attack, guys, is completely blockable. Yep, all of those projectiles can be blocked, and I even used the shield bashes from this attack to interrupt the boss during the attack. Super easy to bash off of, just maybe don't try it directly in front of the boss because that's where a lot of the projectiles land very quickly. Could get hurt or stunned when hit with the brunt of it. 4 minutes and 35 seconds on this one. Definitely felt like one of the easier fights this run, and was pleasantly surprised that you could effectively block so many of its red animation attacks. And lastly, we have Geonor. And I gotta be honest, this fight was on the lengthier side, but at no point did I feel like I was having trouble. Really, it's just the damage of the shield bash that was so low, but man, this fight did not feel difficult in the slightest, which is kind of surprising. Phase 1 was kind of hilarious as he spent the majority of his time just trying to hit me with his sword swings, and I just kept bash spamming him. Honestly, he has a bunch of different moves that are blockable, so I'm just going to go over the red animation ones in phase 1. He has a stabby ice projectile, a stabby charge, the dive bomb when he turns into a wolf temporarily, and a combo where he creates 2 ice walls in a V formation from where he's standing, and then a big overhead swing that deals damage between them and blows them up. Didn't try blocking any of these, so apologies again, though I think I may use this as inspiration to create another video that goes through all of the red animation attacks that you can block or block parts of, so keep an eye out for that one in the future. So phase 2 is what took the longest, mostly because of the animations on some of his moves and when he breaks out in poem. But similar to phase 1, he has a ton of blockable moves, many of which are pretty scary but are trivialized with active block, like his beams from the sky, you can block those. His big charged up Frost Nova attack, you can block that. his Frost Breath, you can block that too, and so on. Without even a lot of stun buildup from the attacks, to be honest. The only time I had to pay attention to my stun meter is when he was yapping and summoning his boys. Those summoned mobs seemingly had more stun buildup than the boss himself. As a nice bonus, my shield bashes actually interrupted his channeling abilities, like the Sky Beams and his Frost Breath. Shield bash seemed really effective in this fight, guys, except for the whole, damage part. I actually switched to pin 1 into my support jumps for this fight again, thinking it would save time, but strangely enough, just rolling with Brutality and Bleed was the way to go this time around. The bleed damage was just way more significant, and even with heavy stunning Geonor, this felt faster with the added damage, so that's what I rolled with. Fight was still on the lengthier side at 14 minutes and 15 seconds, but man, it was still somehow engaging. I actually enjoyed my time in this one, save for the foggy poem sequence that started feeling like a waste of time, but Geonor was super susceptible to shield bash. Was really fun interrupting this guy over and over. And that was Act 1, guys. As you can see, I'm here in Act 2, and I'm going to continue this run as quickly as I can, and hopefully reach the end of the campaign before the big December update, so I've got some bashing to do. If any interesting news about warriors, or in particular shield warriors, comes out in the next couple of weeks, I'll likely make a quick video on my thoughts for those. But yeah, I hope you perhaps learned something, or at least were entertained by this meme of a run so far. Stay tuned for episode 2 once I reach the end of Act 2. Not gonna lie, I'm a little intimidated by Geonor and the Trial of Secamus, but we're gonna go for it. But that's gonna be it for this one, and I will see you guys next time.